What is a cross-stitch laying tool? How do you use it? Does railroading achieve the same thing? Let's find out. If you're wondering why we're over in the slightly less aesthetic corner of my craft room, by the way, the other side has issues today. Hopefully the reflections in my glasses from the window won't be too bad. We will see how it goes. Last week I showed you the amazing birthday package full of new toys that I'd been sent by Stitch 26, and I asked you what specific questions you had about these new bits and bobs. It immediately became apparent that you were most excited for a demo of the trolley needle laying tool. So here we are. But we are going to cover railroading as well in this video for reasons that will hopefully become apparent. So first we're going to look at these 3 blocks of stitching. The first was stitched my normal way with no special method, the second was railroaded, and the third employed a laying tool. Now, look very closely. What do you notice? If your answer to that is nothing, don't worry, you are not alone. Railroading, or using a laying tool, is supposed to make your stitches lie flatter, generally just look more uniform and neater. And it does, it genuinely does. It's just such a subtle effect that it's A, difficult to pick up on camera, and B, just not something that I find worth bothering with for my personal day-to-day projects. However, you might have different results. I know some people who see a really big change in the quality of their stitching straight away. Where I find it makes the biggest difference for me is stitching light colours onto dark fabric. It really does just help everything look nicer, and it also helps a bit with getting better coverage too. These examples though I stitched on white just so that you could more clearly see what's what during the demo. So yeah, just a little bit of a disclaimer there, it might not look like much on camera, but it is worth trying these techniques out. Different people are going to find them different levels of useful in different situations, so it's just another tool to have in your belt. Let's look at how to do them. Railroading is the no tools method. All you need is the needle that you were using to stitch anyway. Step 1, bring your needle up through the fabric as per usual. Step 2, insert the tip of your needle between the 2 strands of floss. So you can see there I've got 1 strand on each side of the needle. Step 3, put the needle back through. Needle up. Some people find it helpful to hold the floss in the direction it's going to be stitched to split it. Needle down. Basically, you're just doing a normal stitch but adding this middle step of inserting your needle to split the threads. What this does is it forces the 2 threads to separate so they can't get twisted or cross over each other, and they lie nicely side by side instead. This makes a difference because it affects how light plays across your stitches. Having them all look the same just gives an overall impression of neatness. Super simple, that is literally it. Makes no difference whether you do half stitches first like I do or full crosses all in one. Just make sure to split those strands before you put the needle back down through your fabric and you are done. When it comes to laying tools, as I said, this one is a trolley needle and it's designed to be worn on your finger while you stitch. You can also get standalone laying tools that are essentially a larger version of this pointy bit here, but both do the same job, so let's take a look at how it works. I will be wearing it on my index finger for this demo with the pointy part on the bottom of my finger, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. Again, we'll bring the needle up as normal, that is step 1. Step 2, insert the needle back down through the fabric, but don't pull it all the way. Step 3, put your laying tool underneath the 2 strands and let them slide over it as you pull that needle all the way through. What this is doing is, again, it just encourages the 2 strands to lie side by side and not get twisted. It's just using a slightly different method as opposed to physically splitting the strands like in the railroading example. I am obviously no expert yet, but I'm doing this quite slowly on purpose so you can see, and also because the camera's in a really awkward position. It was surprisingly intuitive to get the hang of doing this quickly, and also I've got to say it's quite satisfying. I stitched across the bottom legs there with my usual 2-handed method, but if you prefer 1-handed, you can even just keep the finger with the tool ready at all times, like so. If you look at the standalone type of laying tools, you'll notice they're very smooth, rounded, and tapered towards the edge. And I'm pretty sure Stitch 26 did mention something about using those stitch correctors she sent as laying tools, although I may have dreamed that. But either way, it kind of checks out because they are smooth and round and tapered towards the end. Definitely worth a go. So, needle up, needle in, laying tool under. Yeah, that totally works. Brilliant. Now I've got both options. Tips and tricks. Pros and cons. So you've seen that these are both pretty easy to use, but there are some things to bear in mind. One thing I've found with railroading in particular is that it's all well and good splitting those two strands, but if they're still twisted further down towards your fabric, you're still going to have problems. So I like to go pretty close to the fabric, just to make sure I'm splitting it in an actual neat way and not just wasting my time. Railroading also, despite on paper just being like that one more step, really adds a lot of time. Obviously it's negligible on a per stitch basis, but trust me, it adds up. And we talked about that in my old cross stitch faster video, I remember. Like I said, I basically never railroad unless it's something where I'm really concerned with the close-up. Frankly, I am already slow enough a stitcher without making it worse. Part of the reason it can be so slow is because it's kind of tricky to split the threads sometimes depending on your setup. If you stitch with a magnifier, I imagine it's going to be much easier, but yeah, sometimes it's just a little finicky trying to see what you're doing and it really slows you down. I've personally found the trolley needle to be so much faster than railroading, even though I've only been using it for a week as opposed to, 9 years. And I think that is mostly just because it's easier to see what you're doing from a distance. It doesn't take as much concentration. For me, anyway, your mileage may vary. Now with any kind of laying tool, my biggest tip is highly technical. If in doubt, give it a wiggle. I have two strands here that are crossed over each other, but after a bit of wiggling back and forth, as if by magic, they become much more obedient. Very useful technique if you're getting into hand embroidery and trying to improve your satin stitch as well, so bonus tip there, I guess. In terms of the trolley needle, you've probably already spotted a flaw with this, which is that, yeah, it's kind of a health and safety nightmare. To the point where people who have unfortunately learned this the hard way encourage wearing safety glasses. And it makes sense. How many times an hour do you absentmindedly brush hair out of your face or go to scratch your eye? Like, it doesn't bear thinking about. Please be careful, especially if you don't already wear glasses like I do. Eyes would probably be the worst thing to stab a hole in, but I think we'd all agree the second worst thing would be the project that you have been lovingly stitching on for God knows how long. So depending which finger you're wearing it on, you can end up having to develop a sort of crab claw when you're not using it, just to keep it out of the way and prevent it from catching on anything. Which, to be fair, is fine for me, but if you do have any issues with arthritis or anything similar, it's just something to bear in mind. Not that this is super sharp or anything, but I imagine it wouldn't take too much accidental pressure to get it through most fabrics. As for which finger to wear it on, the instructions have it worn as I am here, as I did in the demo, on my index finger, with the pointy part on the bottom of my finger. That was the best for me during filming just because of the angle everything was at. However, I have found that depending on where I'm sitting and the general setup, and even sometimes which part of the Q-snap frame I'm working in, it kind of pays to move it around sometimes. Whether that's just onto the top of my index finger instead, or maybe even onto my ring finger. It's worth experimenting because it's easily adjustable, so just take the time to get a feel for what works. If you're using a standalone, most people will hold it in their non-dominant hand while stitching and just bring it out as needed, which I do find to be a little bit slower, but it might just be because I've practiced more with the trolley needle. It also has the disadvantage of being a separate thing that's going to be easier to lose down the side of the couch, but how much that's an issue for you, again, may vary. Quick editor's note, forgot to mention earlier, when I was using the laying tool, I was holding my frame in the Lowry workstand, and I've seen some people comment and say that you really need a stand of some sort in order to use a laying tool. I don't think that's true. I've managed to get it to work just fine holding a small Q-snap in hand, so I think it's just going to kind of depend what you're doing. It was definitely more awkward at first, but after a bit of practice I got it to work. So if you don't have a stand and you still want to use a laying tool, I say give it a go. The big tip, whether you are railroading or using a laying tool, is this. Don't use it more than you need to. Some people are going to be fine not doing any of this stuff. That's usually me. I'm a very lazy stitcher. I've come to terms with that. But if you do like the effect, you might find it a better idea to do the bottom leg just normally and only railroad or only use your laying tool on the top leg of your stitch. That's the one that's most visible, and anecdotally this does seem like it's a popular way for people to go. That said, I know people who railroad both legs of every single stitch they do and they seem perfectly happy, so if that's you, crack on. As I said at the start, you might find that this is pointless for you on light fabrics, but an absolute lifesaver on dark. You don't know until you try it, so I would encourage you to try it, just in case. Alright, that was a very quick look at each method, but to be honest, there's not all that much else to say. They're both very simple techniques, and it's just a question of which one you prefer, if any. I hope this video did answer all of your questions, but if not, of course, pop them down in the comments and I will do my best. Thank you again to Stitch26 for all of these exciting new toys. And also thank you to everybody who supports me and the channel over on Ko-fi. Special shout out to my Stitch squad, who currently are Marianne Johnson, Sunny, Candy Riley Pettinger, Laura Sellerts, Enlightened Flamingo, Cross Stitch the Globe, I'd Rather Be Stitching, Angela Sue Harrison, Emily Hobbs, Maria Midnight Crafting, Lee the Cozy Crafter, and Asta Vinka. I'll be back soon with some more crafty nonsense, so in the meantime, have a brilliant rest of your day and keep making cool stuff. Bye!